Welcome once again, my friends, and thank you for stopping by to listen to an old storyteller. Today we have a story from South Africa, and the title of this story is The Lion and the Jackal. Once upon a time there was a big lion. He was not so big as an elephant, not even so big as a camel, but he was big all the same. He was strong, too, and fierce, with a great thick mane, and a tail with a tuft at the end of it. I think perhaps he didn't have a very good brain, but you can't have everything, can you now? Not far from Big Lion there lived a little jackal. He was very little. Not so little as a rabbit, of course, and nothing like so little as a mouse, but quite small compared with this lion. He wasn't particularly strong, and he wasn't so very brave. But he was cunning and clever. He was a good deal cleverer than the lion. It's very useful sometimes to be clever when you are not very big or particularly strong. When you have heard this story, you will see what I mean by that. One day when Big Lion was out walking, he met Little Jackal. "Good morning, friend," said Big Lion. "Good morning, my lord," answered Little Jackal very politely. "I hope your lordship's beautiful wife and charming family are all quite well." Big Lion thought this very thoughtful of Little Jackal, and so he asked him whether he would care to go hunting with him. Little Jackal said he felt much flattered by the proposal, and would be very pleased indeed to go hunting with Big Lion, for he thought that with the help of such a very powerful creature, he would come in for a fine lot of food for himself and his family. But a slight disappointment awaited him, for Big Lion explained that if they killed a large antelope, he would claim it. But if they killed a small one, it was to be Little Jackal's. Certainly, said Little Jackal politely. But he wasn't, as I said before, very pleased with the arrangement, and decided in his heart to get the better of Big Lion before the day was out. So they hunted together all the day, and in the afternoon they killed a big eland. "I should like you to run round with that to my wife and child," said Big Lion. "I will continue to hunt by myself until you return." "By all means," said Little Jackal. But as soon as the lion's back was turned, he sneaked quietly off in the direction of his own home. "Big Lion is very much mistaken if he thinks I shall take meat round to his home when my own children are hungry," said Little Jackal, as he trotted along to his home. It was on top of a rock, so high that you had to call for a rope to be let down before you could get up to it. Big Lion went on hunting by himself while Little Jackal was away, but he caught nothing further. By the time Little Jackal returned, it was too dark to hunt any more, so the two parted. But when Big Lion arrived home, he found his wife waiting anxiously for him at the entrance to his home. Oh dear, she said, when she saw him coming along empty-handed. "Have you brought us no supper? It was bad enough to have to go without our dinner, but now it looks as though we shall have to go to bed hungry." Big Lion was very much surprised. "Didn't Little Jackal bring you food at dinner time?" he said. "No such thing," said his wife. "We are dying of hunger." So Big Lion went off post-haste to the home of Little Jackal, but he had no means of getting up the rock. So he sat down by the stream which ran at the foot of the rock and waited and waited. And before very long, Little Jackal came down to the stream for a drink. But when he saw Big Lion sitting there in the dust with his whiskers bristling and his eyes gleaming and his tail thumping on the ground with rage, Little Jackal ran away as fast as he ever could run. He ran till he came to a hole in the ground beneath a tree and darted into it for safety, for he knew that Big Lion was too big to get inside. But Big Lion was close behind him, so close that he managed to get hold of Little Jackal's tail, which was, of course, the last thing to disappear into the hole. He put his paw very firmly down on the tail, and Little Jackal could not move. "Now I've got you," said Big Lion. "Got me? What do you mean?" said Jackal's voice from inside the hole. "Got you by the tail," said Big Lion. "That's not my tail," said Little Jackal. "That's a bit of the root of the tree you've got hold of." "It feels like a tail," said Big Lion. How can I be sure that it isn't tail?" "That's easy enough," said Little Jackal. "Go and find a stone, and then come back and give it a good bang. If it's my tail, it will bleed." Big Lion thought this was quite a good idea, so he set off to find a stone. But as soon as his tail was free, Little Jackal went farther into the hole, so that when Big Lion got back, there was nothing of him to be seen at all. After waiting for some time, Big Lion went off home. But he was very cross indeed, for he and his wife and their child had all to go hungry to bed that night. The next day Big Lion came again to look for Little Jackal, and this time he came suddenly upon him as he sat dozing under the shade of a bush. Little Jackal saw that he would not have time to get away, but his mind worked very quickly. "Hush, hush," he said, when Big Lion was almost upon him. "Hush, don't make a sound. There's a great big bush buck just on the other side of that rock. I've been waiting here for ages. I'm so glad you come in time to help. Wait here while I go round to the other side and drive him towards you." So Big Lion stood and waited. He waited and waited. But no bushbuck appeared, and no Little Jackal appeared. He had run back to his home as quickly as his legs would carry him. And after some time, Big Lion began to realize that he had been fooled again, and went back home more determined than ever to catch Little Jackal sooner or later. But as time went on, he began to feel less vexed about all this, for although he wasn't very clever, he was not the sort of creature to bear malice, and Little Jackal was quite an amusing companion. So one day he asked Little Jackal whether he would go hunting with him again. Little Jackal felt very flattered. "He can't do without me," he said to his wife. "He's rather a nice old dear," said Mrs. Jackal. "Don't you go spoiling everything by being too smart." So Little Jackal and Big Lion went off hunting again. Before long, they killed an ox. "I will stay here and keep watch over the carcass," said Big Lion, "while you take away the pieces of flesh." And he gave him a nice piece of the breast to take to Mrs. Lion. But as soon as Little Jackal got out of sight of Big Lion, he paused and had a look at the piece of meat. "That will make a lovely dinner for my wife and children," he said to himself. "The next piece will do for Mrs. Lion." So he trotted off to his own home with the piece of breast. On his return, Big Lion was waiting to give him another piece of meat, but this time it was a nasty, scraggly bit of shin. "The mean old thing," said Little Jackal to himself. "A nice dinner that would have been for my wife and children." And he set off with it to the home of Big Lion. But when Mrs. Lion saw the nasty piece of shin, she was very angry. "What do you mean by bringing me a piece like this?" she said. "My husband knows very well that I never touch shin. Take that to your own wife and bring me a better piece. This will do very well for her." Little Jackal was so angry when he heard this that he seized hold of the piece of shin, gave Mrs. Lion a bang in the face with it, and then threw it into the bushes. When he got back to where Big Lion was waiting, he found that he had another piece of breast ready for him to take. "My wife will have finished the other bit by now," he said, "so you can run along with this." But again Little Jackal decided to take it to his own wife, and so again Mrs. Lion waited in vain for dinner for herself and her child, while Mrs. Jackal and her little ones had a feast such as did not come their way many days in the year, I can tell you. But when Big Lion reached home in the evening, he found his wife in a furious rage. "Was it you," she asked, "who sent Little Jackal to beat me and your child? And was it you who sent me a piece of shin for my dinner, when you knew perfectly well that I should never dream of touching such a thing?" Big Lion was very angry indeed when he realized that Little Jackal had again cheated him, and he was determined that this time he would catch Little Jackal and pay him out. But Little Jackal was very careful to keep out of his way, and he was such a cunning fellow that several weeks went by without Big Lion getting so much as a sight of him. But at the end of that time there was held a big council for all the animals, and Big Lion presided over it, for he was the chief of all the beasts. Little Jackal wanted very much to go to the council, for he was inquisitive as well as cunning, and he hated to be left out of anything that was going on. But he was frightened to show himself, and his wife tried to persuade him to stay at home. "Big Lion will eat you up," she said, "and then what will become of me and the children?" But Little Jackal thought and thought until he thought of a plan. He got wax from the bees and made himself a pair of horns of it, and he stuck the horns onto his head and then came and showed himself to his wife. And his wife didn't know him, but took him for a stranger. And as for his children, they all ran away and hid. So Little Jackal went off in glee to the meeting. Nobody knew him. They thought he was a distinguished stranger and made room for him by the fire. But the fire was warm and the meeting was long, and before it was over, Little Jackal had fallen fast asleep. And the heat of the fire gradually melted the wax horns. And when it was time to go home, Big Lion came closer to the fire to warm himself before starting, and saw that the stranger was none other than the wicked Little Jackal, for whom he had been looking for such a long time. But just as Big Lion was about to pounce on him, Little Jackal woke up, and he was so quick that he managed to escape and rush off to his home. Big Lion went after him, but Little Jackal arrived first, and Mrs. Jackal, who was on the lookout for him, let down the rope when she saw him coming and pulled him up just in time. And Little Jackal stood on top of the rock and said rude things to Big Lion. "Who are you, and what is your name, and whose son are you, and where do you come from, and what do you want, and what do you want for him for?" he said all in one breath. "I want you," said Big Lion. "Let down the rope, and I will tell you what I want you for." Then Little Jackal let down the rope, but the rope was made of mouseskins, and when Big Lion was halfway up, it came in two, and he fell down and broke his neck and was killed. And that was the end of him, and that is the end of the story. Thank you once again for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please press that like button. Also, please help an old storyteller out by subscribing to my channel. The next story will be posted in a few days, so until then, may your story continue to be a good one.